"May I kiss you?" The billionaire whispered, unaware that one kiss would change his life. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The night was cold, the kind that made every breath turn white and every heartbeat echo louder against the dark. Somewhere on the empty highway, a silver car had skidded off the wet asphalt and slammed into the guardrail. The rain poured relentlessly, mixing with the flashing red and blue of the emergency lights. A young paramedic named Claire knelt beside the wreckage, her hands trembling as she checked the man's pulse. He was pale, motionless, his suit soaked through with rain. "Stay with me," she whispered, brushing the blood from his temple. The man didn't move. His lips were turning blue. She tilted his chin up, ready to perform CPR, when suddenly his eyes flickered open, startled, lost, searching. "May I kiss you?" The words came out broken, a faint exhale that barely reached her ears. She froze, her breath catching, thinking it was just delirium from the shock. But something in his tone, gentle, pleading, almost sacred, made her lean closer. Their lips met for a fleeting second, not out of romance, but survival, and just as her tears mixed with the rain, the monitor on her wrist beeped. His heart was beating again. Claire gasped, her hands shaking as she reached for the oxygen mask. You're okay, she whispered, though her own voice trembled. He tried to speak again, but exhaustion claimed him. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was unconscious once more. She didn't even know his name, only the faint warmth of that impossible kiss. Hours later, at the hospital, Claire sat alone in the dim corridor, staring at her reflection in the vending machine glass. Her uniform was drenched, her hair matted to her face. It had been another shift where she gave everything and went home with nothing but silence. She told herself it didn't matter. Saving lives was enough. Yet, as the rain continued to fall outside, she couldn't shake the memory of his voice, the billionaire she didn't yet know, whispering a question that would change both their worlds. "May I kiss you?" It replayed in her mind like an echo she couldn't turn off. And somewhere across the city, in a private hospital suite, a man with an oxygen mask stirred in his sleep, dreaming of the same moment, unaware that the woman who saved him had taken a piece of his soul with her when she walked away into the storm. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean but heavy with silence. Claire sat in the hospital cafeteria, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee she could not afford to replace. Her uniform clung to her skin from the long night, and the faint smell of antiseptic still lingered on her hands. Her eyes were tired, but her mind refused to rest. Every time she blinked, she saw his face again, the stranger she had pulled from the wreckage, the man who whispered words she would never forget. "May I kiss you?" It had been a plea between life and death, a breath shared in chaos. She tried to convince herself it meant nothing, just a reflex, just part of her job. But deep inside, something about that moment had branded her. She did not even know his name. All she knew was the sound of his heartbeat returning under her palms. When she clocked in for her new shift, the emergency department was buzzing as always, stretchers, beeping machines, voices overlapping. Claire pushed through the noise, focused, disciplined, doing what she always did, saving strangers, one life at a time. Around noon, the head nurse called her over. "Claire, report to the VIP wing on the top floor. They need a temporary nurse for a special case. You are on rotation." Claire frowned. "VIP? Are you sure?" "That is not my department," the nurse sighed. "Short-staffed. They asked for someone calm under pressure. That is you. Go." Minutes later, Claire stepped out of the elevator into a world that did not feel like the same hospital. The walls were marble, the lighting soft and golden. It smelled of money and perfection. She could hear the steady hum of machines from a room at the end of the corridor. She adjusted her badge and entered quietly. The man in the bed looked peaceful, but his face made her freeze. It was him, the man from the wreck, the billionaire, the one she had kissed to bring back his life. Claire's heart skipped. She stood motionless, her hand gripping the edge of the chart. His name was written in bold on the folder, Nathan Cole. She knew that name. Everyone did. Tech empire, Fortune magazines. The kind of man whose world existed above clouds, far from people like her. Now he was lying there, fragile, attached to tubes, his chest rising slowly with each mechanical breath. "You again," she whispered under her breath, almost in disbelief. For days she tended to him, quietly, carefully. She cleaned the wounds on his arms, checked his vitals, replaced IV lines. Sometimes, when the ward was silent, she caught herself talking softly to him, telling him stories about the city, the night shifts, the way coffee never tasted good after 3 a.m. It made her feel less alone. And though he never moved, she swore there were moments when his eyelids fluttered, when his fingers twitched, as if he heard her voice from somewhere deep within the haze. The senior doctor had warned her he might not wake up soon. "Head trauma," he said. "He may remember nothing when he does." Claire nodded, but in her heart she remembered every detail of that night. The rain, the wreck, the whisper. One evening, after the last round, she stood by his bedside longer than usual. The sunset painted the room in gold, and for the first time, she allowed herself to really look at him not as a patient, not as a billionaire, but as the man whose life had brushed against hers. "You owe me a heartbeat," she murmured with a soft smile. "Maybe one day you will open your eyes and say thank you." Her words faded into the hum of the monitors. But as she turned to leave, she did not notice the faint movement of his hand, the slow bend of his fingers, or the single tear that escaped the corner of his eye. Nathan Cole was still somewhere between dreams and waking, but in the depths of that silence he knew her voice. And it was that voice that kept calling him back to life. Days passed, and Nathan's condition began to improve. His color returned, his breathing steadied, and the doctors called it a miracle. Claire never thought of it that way. To her, it was just what she prayed for every night, even when she told herself she did not believe in miracles anymore. On the fourth morning, as she adjusted the blinds and checked his chart, she heard a faint rustle. The sound was so small it could have been the wind, but then came his voice, quiet and hoarse. "Where am I?" Claire froze. The clipboard nearly slipped from her hands. She turned slowly. Nathan's eyes were open. His gaze was dazed, unfocused, but alive. For a moment she just stared, unable to breathe. "You are in Westbridge Hospital," she said softly, her voice trembling with relief. "You were in an accident, but you are safe now." He blinked a few times, trying to make sense of her words. "You saved me?" She hesitated, her hands gripping the bed rail. "The rescue team did. I was there." Nathan studied her face, confusion flickering in his eyes as if he were searching for something familiar. "Your voice," he whispered. "I know that voice." Claire's heart skipped, but she smiled gently, masking the storm in her chest. "You might have heard it while you were unconscious. I talk to you sometimes. It helps patients recover." He tried to nod, but winced from the pain. "Thank you," he murmured, his eyes heavy again, "for not giving up." Claire watched him drift back to sleep, her throat tightening. She wanted to tell him everything, that she had been the one to pull him from the wreckage, the one who gave him air when he was slipping away. But something stopped her. Maybe fear. Maybe humility. Maybe the quiet understanding that some truths were better left unsaid, at least for now. In the days that followed, Nathan began physical therapy. He was determined, even stubborn, pushing himself harder than the doctors advised. Claire was assigned to monitor him through his recovery, and though she tried to remain professional, something about his quiet strength drew her in. He was not the man she expected a billionaire to be. He laughed softly when he stumbled, thanked every nurse who passed by, and listened when she spoke. Yet there were moments late at night, when the hallways were empty, when his eyes turned distant, haunted. "You do not remember the accident, do you?" Claire asked one evening as she helped him adjust his brace. Nathan shook his head slowly. Just flashes. Rain. Glass breaking. A woman's voice. Then nothing. Claire's hand paused for a second, her chest tightening. "Maybe that is for the best," she said, forcing a smile. "Some memories hurt more than they heal." Nathan looked at her then, his eyes soft. "Maybe, but some are worth finding again." The silence between them deepened, gentle but charged. Claire turned away first, pretending to organize the medicine tray. She could feel his gaze linger a moment longer before he said quietly, "You remind me of someone." "Maybe you have seen too many nurses," she replied lightly, but her pulse quickened. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Nathan leaned back, exhaustion settling in. "Claire," he said, his tone thoughtful, "if someone saved your life, and you could not remember them, would you want to?" The question hung in the air like the fading echo of a heartbeat. Claire looked at him, her lips parting, but no answer came. She simply said, "Rest, Mr. Cole. That is enough thinking for one day." As she turned off the light, his whisper followed her to the door, barely audible but enough to make her heart stop. "Thank you for the second chance." Outside the room, Claire leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. She could feel it, the beginning of something she did not have a name for yet. A connection born from chaos, now breathing in silence. And deep down, she knew that one day, the truth about that night, about that kiss, would find its way back to him. Over the next week, Nathan's strength began to return, but so did his curiosity. He wanted to know everything: how he had been found, who had called for help, who had been there when he opened his eyes for the first time after the crash. Claire always gave him the same calm answer, that the rescue team had done their job, and she had only done hers. Yet every time she said it, Nathan's eyes held hers a little longer, as if trying to read between the lines. One afternoon, as the late sunlight filtered through the blinds, Nathan asked her a question she did not expect. "Claire, why did you become a nurse?" She looked up from his chart, surprised. "Why? Because someone has to care when the world stops." Nathan smiled faintly. "That sounds rehearsed." Claire laughed softly, shaking her head. "No, it is just the truth. My father died in an accident when I was 17. Nobody could save him, but I remember the nurse who sat beside me that night. She did not say a word. She just held my hand until morning. I guess that is why." Nathan listened quietly, his expression softening. "You remind me of her," he said, and something in his tone made Claire look away before her heart gave her away. "You should rest," she said, changing the subject. But rest was the last thing Nathan wanted. His days were filled with physical therapy, medical tests, and endless business calls he insisted on taking even from his hospital bed. Yet somehow, amid the noise of his recovery, he found peace in her presence. She was steady, grounded, a rare calm in a life built on chaos. Every time she entered the room, the air seemed to shift. "You know," he said one evening, "I built an empire out of logic and control. But the night of the crash, I felt everything slip away. For the first time, I was not afraid to lose it all. I was afraid of being forgotten." Claire met his gaze, her voice quiet but firm. "You were not forgotten. You were found." The words hung between them, simple yet heavy. Nathan smiled, and for the first time, Claire saw a warmth that did not belong to the billionaire everyone admired, but to the man who had once whispered a plea in the rain. That night, when she left the ward, she found a small envelope tucked under her name tag at the station. Inside was a folded note in Nathan's handwriting. It read, "Thank you for being my reason to wake up." Her heart fluttered, but she knew she could not cross that line. He was her patient, her responsibility, nothing more. At least that was what she told herself. A few days later, Nathan was discharged. The hospital lobby was bright, full of reporters waiting for a statement. Claire stood in the background, watching him navigate the flashing cameras with the composure of a man who had lived half his life in front of them. Before stepping into the waiting car, Nathan turned and found her in the crowd. Their eyes met for just a second, long enough for him to mouth the words, "Come visit someday." She smiled faintly but said nothing. When the car doors closed, she felt a strange emptiness settle in her chest. Back in her small apartment that evening, Claire placed the note on her nightstand beside her alarm clock. She traced the handwriting with her fingers and whispered, "Goodbye, Nathan Cole." But even as she said it, she knew it was not the end. Across town, inside his glass-walled penthouse, Nathan stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. He touched his chest absent-mindedly, feeling the faint echo of a heartbeat that had once stopped on a rain-soaked highway. He did not know her story, not yet, but he knew this: whoever that nurse was, she had done more than save his life. She had changed it. A month passed. The rhythm of hospital alarms was replaced by the hum of city life, and Claire tried to convince herself that everything had returned to normal. Her days blended together: early shifts, long hours, the quiet company of patients who came and went. But every now and then, when a patient whispered, "Thank you," she would hear his voice instead. Nathan Cole's eyes, his note, his quiet strength, they lingered like a shadow she could not shake. One Friday evening, as she finished charting the last patient of her shift, the head nurse approached her with a clipboard. "Claire, there is a charity event next weekend at the Grand Meridian Hotel. They want a few representatives from Westbridge Hospital. Would you go? You are one of our best." Claire hesitated. A charity event? Yes, the nurse said, smiling. Hosted by the Carter Foundation. It is for first responders and healthcare workers. You deserve it. Claire smiled politely, but her stomach tightened. The Carter Foundation was one of the largest donors in the city. And its chairman, Nathan Cole. She thought about declining, but something inside her whispered, go. The following Saturday, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and soft jazz. Claire felt painfully out of place in the simple navy dress she had borrowed from her neighbor. She stayed near the back, clutching her glass of sparkling water, blending into the crowd. The stage lights dimmed, and a familiar voice filled the room. Good evening, everyone. I am Nathan Cole. Her heart stopped. There he was, standing tall, confident, alive. He looked completely recovered, no sign of the man who once lay unconscious beneath her hands. As he spoke about resilience and gratitude, his eyes swept over the audience, and for a heartbeat they found hers. The world seemed to stop. He froze for half a second, then continued his speech, but his tone changed softer, almost personal. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones who expect nothing in return, he said. They remind us that kindness is not weakness, it is strength. The applause was thunderous, but Claire barely heard it. When the event ended, she slipped out into the hallway, her pulse racing. She was almost at the elevator when she heard his voice behind her. Claire. She turned. Nathan stood a few feet away. No cameras, no crowd, just him. You came, he said, breathless with something between surprise and relief. She forced a smile. I was invited? He took a step closer. You were more than invited. You were meant to be here. Mr. Cole, she began, but he interrupted gently. Nathan, please. His voice softened. I looked for you. After I left the hospital, I tried to find the nurse from that night, but your name was not on any report. Why did you never tell me? Claire's throat tightened. Because I did not do it for credit. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Nathan nodded slowly, his eyes glimmering with something unspoken. Then let me say this now, not as a patient, but as a man who owes his life to a stranger, thank you. She looked at him, her composure cracking. You do not owe me anything, Nathan. You already gave me something without knowing it. What is that? He asked softly. You reminded me why I chose this job, she said. Why life is still worth fighting for. For a moment they just stood there, the hum of the city echoing through the glass walls of the hallway. Then Nathan smiled, the same quiet smile she remembered from his hospital bed. Maybe, he said, this is not the end of our story. Claire's lips parted, but before she could reply, his assistant called from down the corridor. He gave her a small nod and walked away, leaving her standing in the golden light of the ballroom exit. That night, as Claire drove home, she replayed his words over and over. Maybe this is not the end. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he was right. The days after the gala felt like a dream Claire was afraid to wake from. Nathan's face, his voice, the way he had said, maybe this is not the end, stayed with her like a melody that refused to fade. She told herself that billionaires did not chase nurses, that men like him moved in worlds where women like her were invisible. But a week later, when she walked into the hospital break room, she saw a bouquet of white lilies on the table, wrapped in a silver ribbon. There was no card, just a small folded note with her name. She hesitated before opening it. Inside, the handwriting was unmistakable. For the woman who gave me my second life. Dinner? 9. Her heart raced. That evening, she found herself standing in front of a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. It was elegant but warm. The kind of place that made time slow down. When Nathan appeared, dressed simply in a dark shirt and no tie, he looked more human than she had ever seen him. You came, he said with a soft smile. You asked, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They sat by the window, and for the first time Claire saw the man behind the name. He told her about the accident, how he had been driving back from a meeting he never wanted to attend, how one wrong turn changed everything. I used to think control was everything, he said quietly. Now I realize it was suffocating me. You reminded me that being alive is not about control, it is about connection. Claire listened, her fingers wrapped around her glass, afraid that if she moved, the moment would vanish. You talk like a man who has seen the other side, she said gently. He looked at her then, and something in his eyes made her chest tighten. I have, he whispered, and I saw you there. She laughed nervously, trying to shake off the weight of his words. That was not heaven, Nathan. That was a rainstorm and a very bad night. Maybe, he said, smiling, but it felt like salvation. They talked for hours about small things, about nothing at all. By the time they stepped outside, the city lights shimmered on the water. The night air was cool, and for a moment they just stood there, silent. Then Nathan said softly, "Claire, can I show you something?" He led her a few blocks down to a modern building with glass walls and a glowing sign. Carter Foundation Healing Hearts Initiative. Inside were photographs of nurses, firefighters, and rescue workers, people who had saved lives in the shadows, never seeking recognition. "This," he said, turning to her, "is because of you. That night, you told me I was found. I want others to feel that too." Claire blinked back tears. "You did all this in a month?" Nathan shrugged. "Money moves fast when your heart finally knows where to send it." She smiled through the tears, overwhelmed. "Nathan, I do not know what to say." He took a step closer, his voice barely a whisper. "Then do not say anything." For a long moment, neither moved. The noise of the city faded, the air thick with everything left unspoken. Then gently, he reached out, his hand brushing hers. "That night," he said, "I asked if I could kiss you. I did not even know your name. Tonight, I am asking again, fully awake, fully certain." Claire's breath caught. The world around her disappeared, and she could feel her heart racing in her chest. "Nathan," she whispered, "if you do this, everything changes." He smiled, eyes soft. "It already has." And before she could answer, he leaned in, not out of desperation, not from chaos, but from quiet gratitude, and kissed her, tender and real. It was not the kiss that saved his life. It was the one that began it. For a while, it felt like life had finally chosen to be kind. Nathan and Claire began seeing each other quietly, away from cameras, away from gossip. He would visit her after long days at the hospital, sometimes just to bring her coffee or to sit in silence while she finished her charts. She did not need expensive gifts, and he did not try to impress her with them. Their connection was built on something far simpler: truth, gratitude, and the fragile beauty of second chances. Yet peace rarely lasts long when the world starts to notice. One morning, as Claire arrived at work, she found a newspaper left on the front desk. The headline read, "Billionaire Nathan Cole seen with mystery woman. Is she the nurse who saved his life?" Her stomach dropped. There were photographs of them leaving the restaurant, smiling under the city lights. By noon, reporters crowded the hospital entrance, shouting her name. "Claire, are you dating Nathan Cole? Did you use your position to get close to him?" The questions stabbed like needles. The hospital director called her into his office, his expression tight. "Claire, we value your work, but this attention is hurting our image. Until things settle down, we have to place you on leave." Her world tilted. "I did nothing wrong," she said, her voice shaking. "You know that." The director sighed. "I do, but public perception matters." That evening, Nathan showed up at her apartment furious. "I am so sorry," he said, pacing the small living room. "I thought I could protect you from this." "You cannot protect me from the world, Nathan," she said quietly. "They see you as a billionaire who can do no wrong, and me as the woman who got lucky. But this is my life, my job." Nathan stopped, guilt clouding his face. "Then let me fix it. I can speak to the hospital board. I can—" "No," she interrupted softly. "Do not fight my battles for me. That is not why I saved you." For a moment, the silence between them hurt more than any words could. Nathan looked at her as if realizing how much the distance between their worlds still mattered. "Claire," he whispered, "I never wanted to make your life harder." "I know," she said, forcing a faint smile. "But maybe we were never meant to live in the same world." Nathan's voice cracked as he said, "Please do not say that." She turned away, tears welling in her eyes. "You once told me control was not everything. Maybe this is one of those things we cannot control." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "Go, Nathan," she said softly. "Let the storm pass." And though he wanted to argue, he knew she was right. That night, as the rain returned to the city, Nathan stood outside her building, drenched and broken, staring up at her window. Inside, Claire sat on the edge of her bed, clutching the note he once wrote. "Thank you for being my reason to wake up." For the first time, she wondered if saving his life had been a blessing or a curse. And somewhere deep down, both of them knew this was not their ending, only the storm before the calm. Weeks turned into months, and the world moved on, but Nathan did not. Every headline faded, every rumor died, yet one truth remained: he had lost her. Claire returned to work after her suspension ended, quieter, more distant. Her patients still smiled when she entered the room, but the warmth in her own smile had dimmed. At night, she would walk past the city river and look at the reflection of the Carter Foundation's glowing sign across the water, wondering if he was still inside that building, still remembering her. Nathan had buried himself in work, but nothing filled the silence she left behind. Every meeting, every deal, felt hollow. One evening, as he sat alone in his office, his assistant entered holding a folder. "Sir, about the annual gala. It is the one-year anniversary of the Healing Hearts Initiative. The board suggests you honor one of the healthcare workers who inspired the foundation." Nathan's hand froze over the papers. "Who?" The assistant hesitated. "They nominated Claire Bennett." Her name hit him like air after drowning. "Make it happen," he said quietly. "No press, no headlines, just her." A week later, Claire received an envelope with a gold seal from the Carter Foundation. It was an invitation to a private event, honoring acts of courage and compassion. She almost tore it up, but something inside whispered that it was time to face the past. When she arrived, the room was smaller than she expected, intimate, filled with familiar faces from hospitals and rescue units. At the front stood Nathan, not as the billionaire in a tailored suit, but as a man speaking from his heart. "1 year ago," he began, "someone saved my life. She never asked for recognition, never asked for anything at all. But she taught me the greatest lesson: that gratitude is not about repayment, it is about remembrance." As he spoke, he turned, and his eyes found hers in the crowd. "Tonight, I want to honor that person." He gestured toward the screen behind him, where a photograph appeared her, from that night, soaked in rain, her hands on his chest as she fought to keep him alive. Gasps filled the room. Claire stood frozen, her heart racing. Nathan smiled gently. "Claire Bennett, thank you for saving my life, and for reminding me how to live it." The audience rose in applause, but in that moment, it felt like there were only two of them in the world again. The applause faded, but Claire could barely hear it. Nathan stepped down from the stage and walked toward her, each step measured, certain. The crowd parted, as if the universe itself was giving them space to breathe again. When he finally reached her, she whispered, "You did not have to do this." He smiled, his voice steady but soft. "Yes, I did. Because some stories deserve to be told, especially the ones that remind us what it means to be human." Claire's eyes glistened, emotion threatening to spill over. "Nathan, this changes everything." He shook his head gently. "No, Claire. This time it changes nothing except the fact that I am done pretending I can live without you." The room seemed to vanish, leaving only them. Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was not a diamond ring, but a silver pendant in the shape of a heartbeat, the same pattern from the hospital monitor that had marked the moment she saved his life. "I kept this from the night of the crash," he said. "It reminds me that life is fragile, but love is the pulse that keeps it alive. Will you let me spend the rest of mine making sure you never forget that?" Tears streamed down Claire's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak. Nathan smiled, closing the pendant around her neck. The audience erupted again, but it felt distant, almost unreal. Later that night, as they stood outside beneath the city lights, Nathan whispered, "The first kiss saved my life. This one is for everything that comes after." He kissed her softly, no longer a man who needed saving, but one who had finally learned how to live. And as the lights of the city shimmered around them, Claire smiled, knowing that this time their story had found its forever.